It's time to accelerate. Hey friends, this is Andy. Welcome to episode 629 of Accelerate. That's episode 629 of Accelerate, the sales podcast of record. And since it's Friday, it's time for another episode of Frontline Friday with my very special co-host, Bridget Gleason. In today's episode, Bridget and I are joined by a guest, Ken Lundin. Ken is the organizer and the host for the upcoming B2B Sales Summit, which, full disclosure, I'm honored to be a guest and one of the featured experts on the Sales Summit. And in this episode, Ken joins Bridget and me to talk about whether there are universal truths in sales. I mean, are there, or let's say, should there be, a common set of core values that all sellers should adhere to and have? We're also going to dive into how sellers should be trained on those values and how managers need to assume the responsibility for creating sales cultures that enable and support those values. It's one thing to say you're customer focused. It's another thing to be consistently customer focused. Really good conversation coming up. Make sure you stick around for this. If you'd like to see the show notes for this episode, go to andypaul.com/629. If you're a top performer in your current sales role and you're looking for a fresh sales challenge to take your career to the next level, then check out CenturyLink. With its recent acquisition of Level 3, the new CenturyLink is a world leader in providing cloud, security, real-time communications, hybrid IT, and managed services. So if you want the excitement, challenge, and rewards that come from selling industry-leading services to the enterprise, then visit CenturyLink.com/accelerate. That's CenturyLink.com/accelerate and join their talent community. Once you join the talent community, a member of their team will reach out soon to connect and see if a career at CenturyLink is the right step for you. All right, let's start up Frontline Friday. Bridget.
Andy.
That always reminds me of that insurance commercial with the camera. Or the camel. Camel, excuse me.
Okay, camera, camel.
Camel. You know, Mike. Guess what day it is, Mike? It's hump day.
Hey, well, I don't know those.
It was a funny commercial. You had to have been there.
Right. I know, I got to watch more TV, right?
No. By all means, don't. Remember our conversation we had last week? Invest in your own development. Don't watch TV.
Well, some people maybe there's stuff on TV that you can get for professional development. I'm just not a big TV watcher, but
okay.
You know, I've been a dork since I was born, so why change now?
You don't strike me as a dork.
That's good. I work hard to cover that up.
Did you not hang with the cool kids in school?
I did hang with the cool kids, but
right. I thought I've been undercover.
I've been undercover for quite some time.
Okay, so closet dork.
Well, luckily, I went to a high school that no, but it was a very high achieving high school also. So, being smart was okay. In fact, that was a good thing.
Oh, okay.
So I could still be a dork and occasionally hang with cool kids.
Very cool. Yeah, I sort of was in the middle.
Yeah, that's good to be.
Yeah, my friends were. Well, actually, one of my good friends in middle school who was, at the time was considered one of the big dorks is actually a multi-term congressman from Illinois who's very smart, successful PhD, and then got into Congress. Started his own business, made tons of money, and then ran for Congress. So, yeah, Revenge of the Nerds, right?
I love that. That's a great movie. Spicoli.
So, actually, that was Fast Times at Ridgemont High, but okay.
Oh, that's right. That's right. See, you know your movies.
Yeah. See, I watch TV. Okay. I read a lot of books, too.
That was the movie.
So we have a guest today.
Yay. And not that I'm tired of you, but that's good. Mix it up a bit.
You can't even say you're tired of my face because you don't even look at me while we're doing this. So
I know.
Yeah. You probably have a photo of me hanging over your desk with darts in them. So push pins, as my brother used to do the pictures.
That's great.
So our guest today, Ken Lundin. And Ken, how are you doing?
Hey, I'm fantastic. Sorry, I jumped in just to say hello. You've left so much material open. I don't even know if we need to talk about sales today.
I know. We typically do that. It gives us wide berth in case we don't feel like talking about sales.
Yeah. So feel free to jump in whenever. Act like it's your show. That's fine. So Ken is here. We're going to talk about a number of things, but but I met Ken recently. He's organizing and hosting an online event, an online B2B sales summit. And
Nice.
yeah, we got a B2B sales audience, and he's got a lot of interesting people, fascinating people lined up to be part of that summit and share information, including yours truly. So I thought, hey, let's talk about that a little bit. So Ken, again, welcome to the show. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, well, that's the easy opening, but I think I'll start with, if you were the self-proclaimed in the middle between the dorks and the cool kids, that just means that you weren't the one passing judgment on yourself. I mean, it really just means you were in a void. So that'll be another therapy session that I think we
could use therapy.
Welcome to the void.
Clear. That's been clear.
I think that's why I hung out in the basement so much when I was a kid. My siblings used to give me a hard time about that because they used to call me Dracula because I'd be down in the basement so often by myself in the dark watching TV.
Oh dear. Definitely therapy's needed. Therapy's needed.
Yeah.
It sounds like we could have another podcast out of that. I'm not sure what we would name. Maybe we'd name it The Void, but sounds like that's a much longer conversation. So. Yeah,
probably. So, tell us about yourself.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me come on. You and I did the interview for the B2B Sales Summit. Probably in the last week or so.
Yes.
But the quick and skinny on me is just 20, 25 years of sales and running sales and selling stuff. And over the course of the last year, doing some sales consulting, and just started to realize there was a pretty big void in the markets. That's where the B2B Sales Summit came from. But what was the void? About sales.
We talked about a void before in our personal lives, but what's the void you saw in the B2B sales market? Because quite honestly, I'm like, there's no shortage of online summits, right? I mean, it seems like you can hardly turn around with another one being happening. So what'd you see, and what are you trying to do differently with yours?
That's a great question. So a couple things. In regards to, I think the first is there something in the market that needs to be served? And I do think, even with the plethora of sales summits and such that are out there, we'll talk about that there is still a significant gap in the knowledge, education, training, everybody from sales to sales management needs. And I think probably to say the number one thing that's different about this summit versus anything else that anyone's seen is it's all practitioners and people doing the work. And what I mean by that is we don't have technology companies trying to sell you technology stuff while they're acting like they're teaching you about sales. This is just, it's a who's who of legends and up and comers and just the people who have been knocking down, millions and in some cases billions of dollars in sales with their clients for years.
Okay.
That's fantastic.
I'm a legend now because I'm in there.
Well, you are.
I was been trying to attain that status. So
I've
escaped from the void, and I'm now a legend. That's pretty good in 1/2 hour.
Well, we'll have to get you. Once you've got to crack the top 5. I mean, being the number 8 guy on LinkedIn's social selling, experts. We got to get you up to the top 5, and then I'll be willing to pull the void frame out. That kind of wording out of it.
Okay. Yeah. 8 out of 50, top 50 sales experts. Yeah, not that I'm patting myself on the back. So, all right. So you got practitioners. That's more your sort of your focus, as opposed to technology companies, trying to sell us through a quasi webinar or something. So, but it sort of raises an interesting question, or at least interesting for me. When I go through the lineup, your lineup, and I do this in other sales summits and other similar type events. Do we have too many sales experts out there? I mean, do we have a surplus of sales experts?
Well, let's put it this way. I don't know that I'd say there's a surplus of sales experts as much as I might say there's a surplus of sales opinions.
That is really, really well put. There's 3 strong opinions right here.
Yeah.
Well, that's why we do this show. So when you say there's a surplus of sales opinions, so I mean, one interpretation of that, at least in my mind, off the top of my head, is that we should be able to agree that there are some universal truths in sales. And
so well put.
And yet it seems like we're not able to agree to what those universal truths are.
Yes, it's an interesting way to look at it. I agree with that. So the quick story as far as I frame what I saw, this is different. The other way this is different is I'm interviewing everybody on this. You and I, Andy, did a I don't know, about a 45 or 50-minute interview, and we got into some real tactical stuff. But I can tell you, as I put this lineup together, this was one guy with an idea, right? I don't have a tech company backing me. I don't have anyone else backing me. I'm taking the money out of my right pocket and kind of pushing it out wherever it needs to go to do this. And I think when you start to talk about, my brain just lost where I was going with my subject matter. That's a great interview for a podcast. What were we talking about? This is
too many experts in sales, too many opinions.
Too many opinions. So you said, are there universal truths? So my point was, I didn't know what to expect, really, because I went into it the same way. I said, man, here's all these people. We've got, I don't know, over 4 million social followers who follow the people that are in this summit, that follow them on all their social media, LinkedIn, like a huge email list, all the silliness. I got a lot of people who like them. But I was like, man, am I going to get all these people on here? And everybody's going to have a different opinion. I mean, there was a little bit of fear in doing that. And what it came out of this thing was that's not actually the case. It was awesome to get back to the idea that although each expert, each influencer, each guru, whatever you want to call the people who are in this summit that were talking to me, we were able to get to some universal truths. There are definitely keys to success, and success definitely leaves clues as to what we can focus on. And I know, I read some of the stuff that you've done regarding your lessons after doing all the podcasts you've done. And I couldn't agree more that there are absolutely some universal truths. And all those sales opinions that are out there are probably actually hurting salespeople, sales managers, and companies, because it's like if somebody says something just slightly different and it kind of jives with what I feel as a person, then I pivot. And now I'm pivoting every 14 seconds instead of actually having something systematized that I can go to market with.
Well, I mean, and I'm just sort of thinking about that is that I think one of the things that we're sort of running into this a little bit is that certainly in certain areas of sales, and I think inside sales is one we see that, where it's much more process driven, much more systematized. And this is an issue Bridget and I have talked about and not necessarily agreed about in the past, is that also to some degree, really focused on conformity, sort of taking some of the individuality out of selling. And I think when you take the individuality out, you then don't maximize or optimize the strengths of the individual, and let them develop a style that plays to their strengths. And so when you're talking about opinions and people shifting and something that resonates with them, the question I sort of come back to is, and I think to me at one time, I think that's okay. But what happens is people tend to shift to opinions that reinforce their comfort zones as opposed to shift to following opinions that force them to think differently and do something that's outside their comfort zone.
Yeah, so I'll give you an example that I think is relevant to this conversation. I was coaching a rep 2 days ago, and they did this great thing. It's an inside sales rep, and they've got, they can record the calls. So we're listening to the calls. But when you listen to the calls, you pull them up on your screen, and I'm here in Atlanta, and he was in Louisiana. And I pull it up, and he's already had 4 other people comment on this call. And then he was going to talk to me about it and then have another discussion with somebody else afterwards. And so I think that comes back to, we discussed right in that moment. We said, look, but what's your methodology? What's important? What are we all reinforcing that's the same? Because it sounds to me like you're just confused. And so I think it's really important to come back to what you said, which is process methodology. There's got to be some framework for consistency, because we have to have that kind of methodology. We can put stuff in, but then we can make it different. It's like making a dish. My mom makes spaghetti and my wife makes spaghetti. They both make it completely different, but I know I'm having spaghetti, and they can kind of figure out what works for them as they put the recipe together.
Well, but which one works for you as far as a consumer?
And there you go. And then that's the idea, right? We as the salesperson have to figure out what actually resonates with the prospect within that framework.
Yeah, right. So one of the things that I keep coming back to is that, and sort of to this idea of universal truths in sales is, is there a core set of values, right? Personal values, sort of personal values that sort of, we build our behaviors and habits and skills on top of, that salespeople need to have. And if so, I almost never hear it talked about. We always I envision this pyramid, and there's layers in the pyramid, and the bottom layer, is your values, and you build your habits and your behaviors and habits and skills on top of that. And then once you've got those, then you've got your methods and your process. And we always sort of start at the top of the pyramid. Let's train people on methods and process, but it seems like we don't give any real attention to, very rarely, and I've recently read a book that talked about values, or opened my eyes, is talk about values and how values inform behaviors and how, behaviors become habits before we even get to methods and process.
Well, talk to me more about what you view as, just to make sure that we're on the same page. Talk to me more about what you view as those types of values, or the book that you read. What does that look like? Give me an example of the types of values that we can frame all this other stuff on top of.
Well, I think that things like, how do you value a relationship? Do you respect the relationship that you have with the buyer? What's your perspective? Are you me-centered or are the other-centric? That's a human value that you start with. It could be, are you have the ability to be, empathetic in the way you listen to people? And do you have your values really, can you listen? Somebody said this recently, which I thought was a great way of saying is, can you listen like the buyer? Mm-hmm. That's, obviously another way of sort of describing empathy is, that's a human value. And there are people that measure this, we can say, we screen for it when we hire people and so on, but we know we're not perfect with how we screen people. And so given that we then hire somebody and we're making an investment, we need to be able to expose people to this and train people and give people, guidance on this. Sure.
And that makes a lot of sense. And I think, and I appreciate you expanding on that, because one of the things that I talk about, and I firmly believe, from a values perspective, and I think it's one of the reasons we've had some success working with non-sellers, teaching them how to go out and get business, is the idea that sales is an act of service. And so what you're talking about from a value-based or a belief system perspective, because of that frames every other conversation that I'm able to have, or that somebody who has that particular mindset or that actual value system is able to have. And I think what you're speaking to is the idea that somehow we've lost the intent behind sales. And what I mean by that is that other-centered, is that we're just supposed to be connected. We're connecting solutions with things we can solve. And somehow we've done a poor job as sales managers, coaches, et cetera. And we won't talk about all the stats on coaching and stuff, because as you and I have spoken about previously, they're self-reported. So who knows how accurate they really are. But I think we've lost that ability, or we don't coach to the ability of that we're actually solving problems. And since pipeline is such a huge concern, because there's not enough deals in most salespeople's pipelines, because pipeline is such a problem, we're trying to hold on to deals and force that square peg into that round hole. But yeah, I really like what you're saying, because somebody else who illustrated something really great on that to me was Colleen Stanley. I interviewed her, and we were going on this emotional intelligence for sales. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Most of the time when I hear about emotional intelligence,
it makes you emotional, right?
Yes, I start to cry because I'm unemotional. So most of the time when I hear about emotional intelligence, though, I think you hear about it from are you just empathetic with the customer? And one of the things that Colleen frames very, very well is no, it's about being emotionally mature. And she doesn't use the word mature, but it's about how you manage your own emotions in order to best serve your customer. So yeah, from a values perspective, I think that probably aligns with what you're talking about as well.
So Bridget, what do you think?
I I mean, I agree with what you're saying around kind of the values and having to get down to the core of the values and teach the values. But I would also say that a lot of sales teams they may pay lip service to having these values of empathy and being customer centered. And the sales team and the company culture may be one of get everything you can, or it's all about me. So I see a lot of that. Like, we interviewed someone recently, and the feedback from some of the people on the team was, I just don't know that this person is going to match our values, which are very customer centric, and that this person seemed much more in it for me,
right,
and had been very successful with that approach. So I think it's, you got to make sure the values align. It's going to be really hard to teach a team to be empathetic and customer first if that doesn't align with how the company actually operates. It's not even what they say; it's actually how they actually operate.
Yeah, and there's I was reading, I don't know if you've read Eli Cohen's book Saleshood. Have you read that one?
Mm-mm.
And
I haven't read it either.
It's really an excellent book, and he puts forth the premise that actually culture, to some degree, I mean, values is done at a corporate level, but you can almost say, having those values in place, that the sort of culture and reinforcement of the values happens at the local level. With frontline sales manager really becomes the custodian of making that happen and implementing it in the team. And I think that this is real. I think it's really true. And I think, again, it's another thing that we, as an industry, we don't spend enough time doing is we say, it'd be great if our salespeople were inspired to learn on their own and so on, without spending enough time saying, are the people who are the primary role models, the primary influences on the sales team, i.e. the frontline manager, have they bought into this idea? And I think that's really another gap we're really missing is and just being clear when I was reading Cohen's book is like, that's where we're missing it is, we have all our attention on the salespeople. Really, maybe we're spending a lot more of our time with frontline managers.
Yeah, I think though that the frontline managers can go a long way, but if their values are not consistent with the CEO, what's above them, I think it's going to be tough.
No, I agree, but I'm saying is from an implementation standpoint, we just assume that we've got corporate values, and it's going to flow down to the salesperson. We think it's all
true.
Continuous. Well, no, we got that really important person right there, that key influencer on all those individual contributors, the manager. So if the manager's bought in, are we giving them the tools and the knowledge to lead their team to, embody those values when they go out and sell?
Yeah, and I think we know that the answer is generally no. If you
right. So how do we change that? How do we change it?
Yeah, if you want to cut to the chase, I mean, it's an interesting quandary. I think we've got this kind of Peter principle that rolls up, right? You are a great sales producer, and then we're going to promote you to your level of incompetence and not give you the tools or the insights that you need to go about managing others. And I think what's, the biggest mistake that I've seen, and maybe this is something where if you're a VP or you're a manager and you're listening to this, I mean, in Ken Lundin's opinion, which this is, it's free advice, so it may not be worth anything, but I'd write this piece down and I'd think about this, because when it comes down to what's happening, the biggest mistake that I see with somebody freshly promoted to manager or VP is that they don't believe that their job actually has anything to do with producing sales anymore. And they go into this let's go look at reports and pull data. And they don't realize that coaching and being on deals and actually being a mentor and a role model in the actual sales process with their people and getting shoulder to shoulder and belly to belly with them and their prospects, they lose that. And somehow that's not translated in the promotion to some sort of management level. And I think, I'm interested in your guys' opinions. I mean, what do you think about the idea that when I promote you a sales manager or a VP role, you have to very clearly understand that you have to be actively involved in order to get production through people who aren't you. And so you have to go get it. You have to be involved. You have to stay there. You have to go do deals with them, and you have to get shoulder to shoulder because they need a role model and a mentor, and they don't need you sitting in your office pulling Excel spreadsheets or Salesforce data and just pushing it out to people.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think that is, this sort of gets back to the point I was making before, is, this is a matter of educating sales managers about what they should be doing, what they can be doing to develop the people that work for them. Because if they can successfully develop people that work for them and inspire them accordingly, then that makes their job, makes them successful as well, right? So it's we books have been written about this, cracking the sales management code, other Jason Jordan, others, talking about, we just don't invest sufficiently in our frontline sales managers. And I think that, part of that comes from the fact is once people get promoted, there's this assumption that they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And who does? No one does when they first get promoted into things. I mean, it's experiential. Sales, more than almost any other profession, even at the frontline manager line, is still an apprenticeship.
Well, we disrespect ourselves, right? If you're an accountant, you're a lawyer, you're in finance, whatever it is, you've got all the, you have to continue to get continuing education and these other things. And we think that the only test for us is, are we actually producing? And then we'll roll you up into management if you're a great producer, but who knows if you can manage. If you're not producing, but we happen to like you, we may roll you up into management, but then you don't have any street cred with your people. So if I were to ask this question, so Bridget, I'm interested in your perspective on this. If I were to say to you, I don't think we'll solve the idea of companies actually investing in sales training for management, which is clearly the best ROI you can get, but I think we're all a little biased. If I were to say if we aren't going to solve that companies will change their tactics and invest in sales managers today, what would you think as an individual sales manager who goes, you know what, I got to be better? What would you give them as advice to how they can get better, over the next 30, 60, 90 days, this next calendar year?
And are you talking about how to get better just in general or specifically around coaching and enabling?
Yeah. Well, I guess, that's a great, I apologize. So let me back up. So if I think about it, if I'm a sales manager and I just need to become more effective, whether it's coaching, something else, what as a sales manager myself, what advice would you give to me that I can lean into that will make me more effective at what I do? What things should I be paying attention to? And I know it's kind of a general open-ended question, but I just think sales managers aren't getting that advice from qualified, fantastic people like you. And so I'm interested in your opinion.
Well, I think about what I've done with new managers that, let's say it's been, I'm just thinking back at recent experience or experience in my past new managers, and maybe we didn't have anything formal in place to train them. So one, I would typically operate as a mentor. So I would encourage him or her to find a mentor. And if you ask someone to mentor you, you better be serious about it. You don't want to waste that person's time. I get a lot of requests, and people are kind of serious. They kind of do it, and that doesn't work for me. If you want to, they have to be very serious about wanting to learn. I've encouraged them to join groups, particularly with other like-minded, other sales managers, where they can learn, to have a group that they're involved in. We look for, there aren't a lot of good resources, but I've sent people to classes for managers and training. Again, if we don't have something internally. So there's just sort of a variety. It depends on how they learn and where their gaps are. I would suggest different things for them to do, but it's typically the case that managers come on. I mean, I'm the same way. No matter what role I take, there are gaps. And at Logs.io, I have a great sales mentor that the company we found through the board, and somebody who's, done more than I have to help me to keep growing. So those are some of the things that I think about.
That's wonderful. I interviewed Tom Hopkins for the B2B Sales Summit, and Tom's, as far as I'm concerned, a legend. He's probably responsible for a lot of the income I've made over my career. And I said, what advice would you give to somebody who's young and coming up in sales, say less than 5 years? And the number one thing he said was to find a mentor as well. So I think what you're doing is tying it together. It's continue to look for somebody who can help hold you accountable. And what you said was great, because it's like we have to expect that we have something of value to add to our prospects. Well, we need to treat our internal folks the same way. And if you ask for a mentor, you better be ready to go to work.
Yeah, you definitely don't waste their time. Don't waste their time.
Yeah, and I think that when you bring up that conversation, which actually leads down a whole nother trail in terms of, what's the difference between managing, coaching, and mentoring? And I think there's a terminology, clarification that we should make, because I've sat in a room last month with 20 CROs, and there's sort of confusion, right? People talk about coaching from a very tactical standpoint. Hey, this is what we're going to do in this deal, where other people are talking about coaching as how do we develop this individual? And I'd make the case, just so we keep our terminology straight, that mentoring is how we develop the individual, coaching is how we do the tactical stuff, and managing is managing the team. Because I really think there are three different distinct responsibilities.
Yeah, I think you're right. One of the things we've talked about in the past is I really firmly believe words matter. And I think a lot of times we spend time saying words and thinking that all the people who are listening to us understand what we mean, or we hear somebody say something and we don't seek to clarify it. Like in technology, we may use the word resources. Well, is that time, money, or people? And in different places and different ways, I've heard it mean different things.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So, I love what you're saying.
Okay. Well, unfortunately, we're running out of time. So, Ken, and I apologize for mispronouncing your name up front, Ken Lundin. So tell people what they can, something about learning more about the B2B Sales Summit. Sorry.
Sure. Perfect. Well, I think, you opened it fine, and thank you for letting us just kind of wander around and have a great talk about sales and sales management. I think what you're going to find is, as we talked about earlier, success leaves clues. The B2B Sales Summit with these just fantastic people are out there getting it done with the biggest companies and smallest companies in the world. It's everything from building your pipeline, negotiation, closing, accelerating deals. It's all that good stuff. So if people want to find out more about the B2B Sales Summit, which I can tell you, it's just a bunch of just badass interviews. It's fantastic people like Andy and Tom Hopkins and, Keenan and Trish Bertuzzi and a whole bunch of these cool people. So you can go to the B2B, and it's B, the number 2, B, salessummit.com. You can get on there. It's a free registration, and then there's ways that you can actually have access to the videos forever if you'd like. But I can tell you right now, I've already done the interviews and I've been there, and it's just awesome stuff. And all the interviews are somewhere between probably 35 and 50 minutes. So it's quick hits, and I promise you you'll leave each one of those interviews with something that's actionable that you can go to work and impact your sales pipeline or that of your team the very, very next day.
All right. Well, cool. All right. People, check that out. Ken, thank you. And we'll look forward to talking to you again, maybe after the Sales Summit, see how that went. Bridget, Captain Fantastic, as always. As always. And friends, as always, with you as well. Thank you for spending this time with us. And we'll look forward to talking with you again next week.
Sounds great. Have a good one.
See y'all. Thank you so much.